What happens when Hollywood royalty meets Britain's most ruthless interviewer? What unfolds when carefully crafted PR narratives collide head-on with unfiltered questioning? You won't believe the explosive confrontation that erupted last night on Piers Morgan's show, leaving viewers absolutely stunned and social media in complete meltdown. This wasn't just another celebrity chat. This was a full-blown media war that ended with one of the most dramatic walkouts in television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle stepped into the lion's den and came face-to-face with Piers Morgan's legendary no-holds-barred style. The atmosphere in the studio was already electric as cameras rolled for what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional appearance for Meghan's latest venture. But from the moment she settled into the guest chair, something felt different. The usual pre-show pleasantries were noticeably absent, replaced by an underlying tension that seemed to crackle through the air. Piers, known for his razor-sharp instincts and ability to smell weakness from a mile away, immediately picked up on Meghan's defensive body language. She sat rigidly upright, her perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly in her lap, while her media-trained smile seemed more forced than usual. The seasoned broadcaster had done his homework, and it showed in the calculating gleam in his eyes as he prepared to dig beneath the polished surface. "So Meghan," Piers began with that deceptively casual tone that regular viewers know signals danger ahead, "let's talk about authenticity, shall we? It's something you've spoken about extensively. Being your authentic self, living your truth. But I have to ask, don't you think there's a certain irony in preaching authenticity while simultaneously curating every aspect of your public image?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Meghan's media training kicked in immediately, her response delivered with practiced precision. "I think what people don't understand, Piers, is that sharing your truth doesn't mean sharing every private moment of your life. There's a difference between authenticity and exploitation." But Piers wasn't buying it. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Exploitation? That's interesting coming from someone who's built an entire brand around sharing intimate details about royal life, family relationships, and personal struggles. At what point does sharing your truth become exactly that? Exploitation. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's composure faltered for just a split second, a micro-expression of annoyance flashing across her features before the professional mask snapped back into place. But Piers caught it, and viewers at home caught it too. The comment section was already going wild. "I think you're mischaracterizing my intentions," Meghan replied, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge that careful observers would recognize as a warning sign. "Everything I've shared has been with the intention of helping others who might be going through similar experiences. It's about service, not self-promotion." Piers let out a barely audible scoff, the kind of sound that immediately puts guests on the defensive. "Service? Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a very lucrative form of service. Netflix deals, book contracts, speaking engagements, all stemming from your willingness to discuss private family matters. How exactly does making millions from family drama constitute service?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Meghan's jaw tightened visibly, her hands gripping the arms of her chair with increasing intensity. The carefully orchestrated charm offensive she'd likely planned was crumbling in real time. "You know what, Piers," she said, her voice now carrying unmistakable irritation. "I came here tonight to discuss my work, my projects, and the positive impact I'm trying to make. I didn't come here to be interrogated like I'm some kind of criminal. Your questions are loaded, biased, and frankly, they say more about your agenda than they do about anything I've done." The accusation hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Piers' eyebrows shot up, a dangerous smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This was exactly the kind of pushback that brought out his most ruthless instincts. The veteran broadcaster had been doing this for decades, and he knew when a guest was starting to crack under pressure. "My agenda?" he repeated, his voice dripping with mock innocence. "My agenda is asking the questions that millions of people are thinking but are too polite to ask." My agenda is holding public figures accountable when they make millions from sharing stories that impact other people's lives and reputations. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should ask yourself why. The gloves were officially off. What had started as a tense but manageable interview was rapidly spiraling into something much more volatile. Meghan's breathing had become noticeably shallower, her media training warring with her obvious desire to fight back against what she clearly perceived as an ambush. But this was only the beginning. The real fireworks were about to start, and neither the studio audience nor the viewers at home were prepared for just how explosive things were about to become. The tension reached a boiling point as Piers leaned back in his chair, that predatory smile spreading wider across his face. He'd found his opening, and like a master chess player, he was about to make his most devastating move. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter, casting harsh shadows across both their faces as the confrontation entered dangerous territory. You talk about accountability, Meghan. So let's practice some right here, right now, Piers said, his voice taking on that cold, clinical tone that viewers knew meant someone was about to get absolutely destroyed. Let's talk about your relationship with the truth. Because there seems to be a rather convenient pattern here, of facts changing depending on which platform you're speaking on and how much money is involved. Meghan's eyes flashed with genuine anger now, the polished veneer finally beginning to crack under the relentless pressure. Excuse me? Are you calling me a liar on national television? Because if you are, you better be prepared to back that up with something more substantial than your typical tabloid speculation. The studio audience gasped. This wasn't going according to anyone's script. Piers's producers were frantically gesturing from the control room, but he was in full attack mode now, completely ignoring their attempts to rein him in. This was television gold, and he knew it. I'm not speculating about anything, Piers shot back, pulling out a folder that had been sitting beside his chair. I'm talking about documented inconsistencies in your own statements. For instance, you've repeatedly claimed that you knew nothing about the royal family before meeting Harry, that you were completely naive about what you were walking into. But we have evidence of blog posts you wrote years earlier showing detailed knowledge of royal protocols and procedures. We have photos of you outside Buckingham Palace as a tourist, long before you met your husband. The folder landed on the coffee table between them with an audible thud that seemed to echo through the now silent studio. Meghan stared at it like it was a venomous snake, her complexion visibly paling under the harsh studio lights. Those are taken completely out of context, she stammered. But for the first time since the interview began, her voice lacked its usual confidence. Anyone can visit Buckingham Palace. Having a passing interest in history doesn't mean I understood the reality of what royal life actually entailed. Piers pounced on the weakness like a shark sensing blood. A passing interest? Really? Because according to these posts, you wrote extensively about Kate and William's wedding, analyzed royal fashion choices, and even speculated about potential American members joining the royal family. That sounds like considerably more than a passing interest to me. The accusations were flying now, each one more damaging than the last. Meghan's handlers in the audience looked panicked, some frantically checking their phones, others whispering urgently among themselves. This was spiraling completely out of control, and everyone in the room could feel it. You're twisting everything, Meghan said, her voice rising to match the intensity of the moment. You're taking isolated incidents and weaving them into some conspiracy theory because it fits the narrative you want to sell. This is exactly the kind of character assassination that drove me away from the UK in the first place. But Piers wasn't finished. Not even close. He opened the folder and pulled out what appeared to be printed screenshots, spreading them across the table like playing cards in a high-stakes poker game. Character assassination? Or fact-checking? Because here's what I find fascinating. You've built this entire victimization narrative around being unprepared and blindsided by royal life, but the evidence suggests you were not only prepared, you were actively positioning yourself for exactly this outcome. The studio had gone dead quiet, except for the hum of cameras and the barely audible whispers from the production crew. Every eye in the room was fixed on the two combatants, waiting to see who would land the next blow. Meghan stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this bullshit, she snapped, the profanity cutting through the air like a blade. The audience gasped again. This was definitely not going according to anyone's media training manual. "Sit down, Meghan," Piers commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd conducted thousands of interviews and wasn't about to let a guest hijack his show. "We're not finished here. You came on my program, which means you play by my rules. And my rules include answering difficult questions, not running away when things get uncomfortable." "Your rules," Meghan laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. "Your rules seem to involve ambushing guests with carefully curated hit pieces, designed to humiliate and discredit them. This isn't journalism, Piers. This is character assassination masquerading as entertainment." The confrontation had reached a critical mass. Both participants were now standing, facing off across the coffee table like gladiators in an arena. The studio audience was completely silent, afraid to breathe too loudly and miss a single word of this unprecedented meltdown. "Character assassination?" Piers repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm holding you accountable for your own words, your own actions, your own inconsistencies. If that feels like assassination to you, perhaps the problem isn't with my questions. Perhaps the problem is with your answers." What happened next would go down in television history. The final breaking point was approaching, and everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. The moment of reckoning arrived when Piers decided to play his final card. With the calculated precision of a master manipulator, he reached into his folder one last time and pulled out what appeared to be a series of text messages printed on official letterhead. The silence in the studio was deafening as he held them up for the cameras to capture. "Since we're talking about truth and authenticity," Piers said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that preceded a nuclear strike, "let's discuss these messages between you and certain media contacts, shall we? Messages that were sent during your time as a working royal, coordinating stories and narratives that you later claimed were completely fabricated by the press." Meghan's face went ashen. Whatever those documents contained, they had hit their mark with devastating accuracy. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air, as she stared at the papers in his hands with undisguised horror. "You have no right to," she began, but Piers cut her off with ruthless efficiency. "I have every right to present factual evidence when someone sits in that chair and makes claims about being victimized by media they were actively collaborating with," he snapped back. "These messages show detailed coordination of stories, photo opportunities, and even specific quotes that were later attributed to palace sources. You weren't a victim of the media machine, Meghan. You were actively operating it." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Meghan stumbled backward, her hand gripping the arm of her chair for support as the full implications of what he was suggesting sank in. The studio audience was completely transfixed, witnessing what could only be described as a public execution by documentation. "Those messages are private communications taken completely out of context," Meghan protested, her voice cracking with desperation. "You have no idea what the circumstances were, what pressures I was under, what I was trying to protect." "What you were trying to protect was your image while simultaneously destroying others," Piers interrupted, his voice rising to match the intensity of the moment. "You orchestrated a campaign of strategic leaks and coordinated narratives, then had the audacity to sit on international television and claim you were silenced and abandoned. That's not victimization, Meghan. That's manipulation on an industrial scale." The studio erupted as Meghan finally snapped. "Fuck this!" she screamed, her composure completely shattered. "Fuck you, Piers! Fuck your ambush tactics and your manufactured outrage! You're nothing but a bitter, washed-up hack who gets his rocks off destroying people on television because your own career peaked 20 years ago." The profanity-laced outburst sent shockwaves through the studio. Crew members scrambled, producers were shouting into headsets, and the audience sat in stunned silence as they witnessed one of the most spectacular public meltdowns in television history. But Piers wasn't backing down. If anything, her explosion seemed to energize him, like a vampire feeding on chaos. "There it is," he exclaimed, pointing at her like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "There's the real Meghan Markle. Not the carefully crafted victim narrative, not the media-trained humanitarian facade. This is who you really are when the cameras catch you off guard." "You manipulative piece of shit!" Meghan shrieked, completely beyond caring about her public image now. You orchestrated this whole thing. You never intended to have a fair conversation. You set me up from the moment I walked through that door. The confrontation had devolved into pure, unfiltered warfare. Both combatants were now screaming at each other across the coffee table. Years of mutual antagonism finally erupting in spectacular fashion. The studio lights seemed to flicker under the intensity of the moment, as if the electrical systems themselves couldn't handle the voltage of their mutual hatred. "I set you up?" Piers roared back, his own composure finally cracking after maintaining it throughout the entire ordeal. "I asked you questions. I presented evidence. I did exactly what journalists are supposed to do when public figures make claims that contradict documented facts. If that feels like a setup to you, then maybe you should reconsider your relationship with the truth." That was the final straw. Meghan let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and pure rage. She grabbed her purse and threw it at the coffee table, sending the printed documents flying across the studio floor like confetti at a twisted celebration. "I'm done!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the studio walls. "I'm fucking done with this circus. You can all go to hell." She turned to address the cameras directly, her eyes blazing with fury. "This is what passes for journalism now. This is what you people consider entertainment. Congratulations, you got your viral moment." Security personnel were already moving toward the set as Meghan stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking violently against the studio floor. But she wasn't finished yet. Halfway to the door, she spun around one last time, pointing an accusatory finger at Piers like an avenging angel delivering final judgment. "You want to know the truth, Piers? The truth is that you're a pathetic, bitter man who peaked with a phone hacking scandal and has spent the last decade desperately trying to remain relevant by attacking anyone who threatens your fragile ego. You're not a journalist. You're a parasite." With that final devastating salvo, she turned and marched out of the studio, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. The heavy studio doors slammed behind her with a finality that seemed to shake the entire building. The studio sat in absolute stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. Piers remained standing behind his desk, breathing heavily, his hair disheveled and his tie askew. The scattered documents on the floor served as evidence of the battlefield this interview had become. Finally, Piers turned to face the cameras directly, a mixture of triumph and exhaustion written across his face. "Well," he said, his voice hoarse from the confrontation, "I think that rather speaks for itself, doesn't it?" The cameras continued rolling as cleanup crews began gathering the scattered papers, capturing every moment of the aftermath. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary, the hashtags trending worldwide within minutes. This wasn't just a failed interview. It was a complete public relations disaster that would be studied in media schools for decades to come. The carefully constructed image that had been built up over years had been demolished in less than an hour of unfiltered television. As the studio lights finally dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, everyone present knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. This was the night that live television proved it could still shock, still surprise, and still deliver moments of pure, unscripted human drama that no amount of media training could prepare for. The interview was over, but the fallout was just beginning.